Hi everyone, welcome back to the Code Step by Step channel. My name is Anil Sidhu, and in this tutorial series we will learn about Laravel file and folder structure. So here we are using Laravel 13th version. So first of all, we'll talk about important files and folders, which is very important to know before start with the Laravel project. After that, we'll talk about where we can create our model file, view file, and controller files. Then we'll talk about rest of the other files, which is either they are not important or important, but still we'll talk about them. Then we'll talk about some important interview questions also. So now let's move to the project, and the first and most important file is composer.json. So this file contains all information about your project, like dependencies, which version you are using for Laravel, which version of you are using for PHP and all. So let me show you there. So here you can see that this is our project name. You can change this information also, like you can change your project name, type, description, keywords, license. These things you can definitely change, no issues there. After that, we'll talk about require and required apps. So what are they actually? These are the dependencies. Dependencies means these are the package which are required to run your Laravel application. Now, why there are two types? First one is required and another one is required dev. So required means these packages are required for Laravel application to run your application either on the development or either on the production. Required dev means these are the files which is required for development. So once your development is completed, you can delete these files. There will be no side effect at all, right? Because these three things, PHP, Laravel framework and Tinker, these are the required for the production also, but these are not required for the production. These are only required for development purpose. All right. Then there are other things also, commands and all, but not much required. So I'll not go so much deep. Otherwise, we'll go some other side only. So after that, the another important folder is vendor. So these dependencies, or you can say that the required package where these are installed, either they are required or required dev, all of these are installed in the vendor folder. Here you can see that. So let me show you one or two packages there. So here you can see that Moncrief, and if I search there, here you can see that Moncrief also. Maybe you can ask one question. There we have only maybe 10 or 12 dependencies or dev dependencies only, but there are lots of folders. The reason is these package also have internal dependencies. For example, this faker or boost package maybe need some other package internally. So those packages are also listed there. After that, app folder, which is very important. In this app folder, we define our controller, model, provider, middleware and all. So all core code of your application is written inside the app folder. After that, in resources, we basically write our UI code. Definitely you can keep your CSS files, GS files also. But when you talk about that UI files, like exactly HTML files that you can keep inside the view. So definitely we can use their blade template also. Blade template is basically used to write PHP code inside the HTML file. So whenever you will make your HTML files, you have to keep those files inside the view folder. And definitely if you want, then you can use their blade extension also for blade engine. Otherwise you can create them directly also if PHP code is not required there for inside the HTML. Then if you have to make routes, again you will find there two files. I'll talk about the console also, but first let's talk about the web.php. So whenever we are creating any application in the Laravel, we have to define the paths and routes also. Like you have few pages maybe for login, sign up, profile, setting, product listing, order and all. So all routes will be mentioned inside the web.php. And console.php is basically use when you have to run something on the terminal or command line interface. That time we use this console.php also. And you can create their api.php file also. Maybe you are not aware about the APIs because maybe you are the fresher in Laravel or maybe in coding. But that api.php is used to make routes or API endpoints basically. We'll talk about this more whenever we will learn about the APIs. All right. So now the other important file is the configuration file. In Laravel, you can almost configure everything. You can configure your database, cache, authentication. You can configure your application, queue, mail, service session. Everything you can configure there. and the all configuration files are present inside this config folder. So let's say if you want to maybe change some configurations for your database, like database host name, password, name, anything that you can change there. Similarly, for session, you can make changes either if you want to change the expiry, if you want to change the drivers, anything that you can put there. Similarly, you can make configuration for email, logging, and file system, for everything. All right. And after that, we have one more folder, which is public folder. So in public folder, you will find a index.php file. So whenever you run your Laravel project, so this is the first file of your application which execute. After that, your code go through with the other files and folders also, but this is the initial file which executes. Then you will find their .htaccess file, which is used to configure your web server. There you will find favicon icon. Favicon icon means the icon which you find on that. Here you can see that, right? You got that, what I mean to say. Then robots.txt. If you want search engine crawl your application or not crawl your application, or only few paths should be crawled, then maybe you can configure all of routes there. Then whenever you create Laravel application, definitely, not definitely, but there are high chances that you have to store some kind of file in your application, maybe some PDF, Excel, text file, images and everything. So that will be stored here. Again, in the application, you have some private and public folder also, depending on where you want to keep the uploaded file or stored file. Maybe if you want to keep them private, then you can keep it there. If you want to make them public, then you can keep it there. Again, you can store the session, cache, and other things also in your application, and logs also you can store. So you can keep the all uploaded data or stored data inside this folder. All right, so let me close this vendor folder. After that, you have .env file, which is used for environment data. For example, if you have some mail configuration, then Redis configuration, then session, database configuration, you can keep all these initial configuration in the env.file. And by default, and by chance, if you delete any of the configuration, then for the backup, there is another file .env.example. So let's say if you just delete these keys, TB, password, then you can get it from there. You will definitely get the same key from there, right? So this is basically a backup kind of file. Then these Git attributes and Git ignore files are related to the Git. They are not exactly related to the Laravel. Editor configuration is if you want to change the font size, then space and everything that you can define there according to your requirement, which character set you want to use and everything. Then the other important thing is README.md file. So if you want to define some rules, or if you want to give some instructions to the developers or the new developers, then you can keep all these things there. So if even this is not internally used by Laravel, but this is used for instructions and rules and anything that you want to define, maybe you want to describe your project, you can keep all these information in the read.md file. And sometimes you use any front-end framework or library with the Laravel, and for that we have a package.json file also. So in this file you have the all dependencies and other details about the front-end library or packages. It can be React, Angular, or Vue, and anything. And these package you can install with the Vite, and if you want to configure the Vite, that you can do inside the vite.config.js file also. And there we have another folder which is test. So developers also write the code for unit testing. That code will be stored inside this test folder. And if you want to configure your testing framework, which is phpunit or parcel, whatever you are using, for that you have the phpunit.xml. Here you can configure that framework also. There are few other things, which is agents.ai.amp. So these are the AI related stuff which is not directly impacting your Laravel code. If you will delete these things, still your Laravel application will perfectly work fine. And we'll talk about these folders in some other part when we will work with them. All right. Now we have one question where we can create our MVC file. So MVC, as I already mentioned in the last part in detail, model view controller. So model and controller will be inside the app folder. Inside the app you have a HTTP, and here you can keep your all controllers, and in this models file you can keep your models, and view files will be stored inside the view folder. Here you can see that welcome.blade.php, home.php. so these view related files you can store in this view. And after that, yeah, we cover all of these things. In interviews, they can ask what is the difference between composer and composer.lock, where you store your routes and where you store your models, controller, and views. These kind of question can be asked, and where you will store your configuration, what is the use of .env files. These all things we already discussed in this part. Thank you so much for watching. And if you still have any question and query, you can ask me in the comment section. Thank you so much. Thanks again, guys.